Good day, all. Today we have with us Mudit Dugar. He's an ex-investment banker who transitioned to this really cool, innovative startup called Onivation, which is focused on building Israeli tech companies' India presence. So it's a really cool concept. And just to let our viewers know, Mudit received an admit from HEC Paris's prestigious MBA program. Now, needless to say, it's one of the best MBA programs in the world. People coming from 60 nationalities, about with a very few intake of 290 people, and the alumni is covering all sectors and the C-suite. So it's great, to be part of this program. So Mudit, I'm going to hand over to you. I just want to understand, how did your professional journey unravel? Which led you to finally get into this prestigious program for HEC Paris, where I know the average admit age is about 30 years, and you're one of the youngest people to get admitted. So that's kudos to you, man. I just want to know your journey.
Thank you. Thank you. So my journey basically started from Mumbai. I did my undergrad in NMIMS Mumbai School of Economics, where I did a BSc in economics, minored in finance. And I got an opportunity to work with Nomura in their investment banking program in 2016. They came to our campus for placements, and they recruited three of us from there. So I was the only one from BSc Economics to get admitted that batch. So I was feeling pretty good about it. But to be honest, when I entered Nomura, I had no idea about investment banking or what Nomura really does, what my role would entail, what would be asked of me. So, but luckily that on day one we were told that the learning curve is going to be very steep. So I was mentally prepared that I would have to learn a lot of things and pick up on how to work under high pressure environments, because as I'm sure investment banking environment has tight deadlines, high pressure, and a large quantity of work. Something that I was not very used to right out of college. In college, even though economics was not the easiest of courses, but the workload was nothing compared to what I would face in the real life.
Right.
So starting off with a good training program, and I was lucky enough to join the equity solutions team, which was focusing on the EMEA business. I learned quite a lot. I learned so much in that company, not only about finance, but more so about how to work with larger teams, how to work across countries, organizations run, and the entire a team which is focused on something that I have never known anything about. So more than just, I would say people usually look at investment banking, look at Nomura, and they say that it could be a desk job. You're sitting behind a computer, you're making Excels, you're making PPTs, you're trying to understand financial
Right.
concepts.
Right.
But if you really look at it, it is so much more than that. Essentially, every experience that I've had is what I've made out of it, or anybody for that matter. Every experience that you have, every learning that you have is something that you have to take out of it. On one hand, you could just sit and think that I'm making an Excel, I'm making a PPT. How is this adding value to me? On the other hand, you can say that I'm working with a team which is based somewhere out in another continent. I'm working with people who are from very prestigious colleges around me, and I'm spending my entire day with them, right?
Right.
So essentially, I live by the principle that everything in your life is about people. As we go move on, I'll tell you about my MBA journey, and my decision to do an MBA was largely driven by people, because you are the average of the five people around you. Everything that you do, your financial habits, your eating habits, your sleeping habits, your personality traits, your characteristic, everything is defined by people around you.
Right. Right.
So I was lucky enough to be surrounded by a very, very bright set of people around me at Nomura. And that is the takeaway I took. Even the mentors and my managers, everybody I had were very helpful and very supportive of every decision I wanted to take. After a certain point, after a couple of years, I was doing pretty well at Equity Solutions. I had my targets met, and I was really all ready to move on to London for my next chapter. That's when I realized that I started asking myself, everybody goes through that stage in their life, I feel, where they start questioning, what is it that I really want to do? What should be my next step? What should be the next chapter of my life? And I started asking myself, do I really want to be an investment banker when I'm 50, for example? Do I see myself working at Nomura when I'm 50, or would I be doing something else? And I figured I might change my career at some point in my life. So I might as well do it now while I'm young and while I can take a risk. Why not experiment now rather than stick around, and then it would be difficult for me to change careers later point in my life. So after consulting with my managers, after speaking to my peers, I just quit my job without any plan. So I didn't know what to do next, what was coming next. I just took this leap of faith.
Oh my God. Okay.
Uh, around that time, everything, the grass is always green on the other side, right? When you have a job in Nomura, you wish you had something else. But when you don't have that job, I looked back and I was constantly doubting myself. Did I make the right decision? Is this the right thing to do? Should I have just stayed back? Will I be able to hack it anywhere else? Of course, I think it was just natural for me to feel those things, and everybody would feel those things if it was the first time I was making a jump. So at that point in my career, I just asked around, met a few people, saw what opportunities were going around. That's where I met Saket Agarwal, who's the founder of Onivation. And I actually just went to him for some advice, and I asked him, this is what I've done so far. This has been my background. What do you think I can do? I knew him through a common connection. So I asked him just general life questions. What would you suggest I do? Can you connect me somewhere? I had a very wholesome conversation with him around an hour and a half. And the next day he calls me and tells me, look, we also want to expand, and we've started, and why don't you come on board? Let's try it out. Let's see how it goes, and it'll be fun. So I
Right.
jumped on board Onivation. Now, when I jumped on board Onivation, keep in mind, I had no idea about technology. I had no idea about startups. I had no idea about how businesses are run, about front end businesses, about, I honestly thought cloud literally meant cloud at that time.
Okay.
Cybersecurity, data science,
Hmm.
everything was so new to me. And because it was a startup and we were very limited on resources, we didn't have a big team. Uh, Everybody had to do everything, right? It was just three of us back then, and we had to do everything. So my first week into Onivation, I had to go to Israel with
Oh.
the senior delegation of Mintra. Mintra is the largest online fashion platform, and
Right.
8 people from Mintra C-suite, including the CEO, CTO, CMO, CFO, all of those people went to Israel with us. We were taking their delegation to make them meet all sorts of solutions, all sorts of startups and companies. So a lot of people in the organization, they had a different set of problem statement. Every team has a different problem statement. So the CTO had a different problem he had to solve. The CMO had a different problem. The CEO had a different problem. And our job was essentially to make sure all their problems are met with some solutions in Israel. Because Israel actually, just to give you a little bit of background about Israel, before I jump into what I did and what
Right.
I
Please,
did,
please,
I
please,
still
please
do
go
over
ahead.
there. Uh, Israel basically is a pioneer in technology. It is a small country of around 8 million people. And the reason why they are so advanced in technology is that they don't have such good neighbors, right? They don't have very friendly neighbors, and they don't have a lot of natural resources. So they essentially have to rely on technology, rely on human resources to make sure the country is safe and is always advancing. Everybody has a compulsory military training that they have to go through,
Wow.
and yeah, it's around 3 years. So everybody is mandated to go through that military training, where everybody is given a training into cybersecurity and IT, because that is one of the country's largest resource to say. And when they leave the army, usually they do a 4 month break. Most of them come to India. So if you ever go to the trails around Parvati Valley to Manali, if you go to Goa, you'll see a lot of Israelis who've come there right after their
Right.
army service, and half of them go to South America.
Okay.
So after this break that they get, a lot of them join the high tech community. They start up their own companies, and since tech is very inbred over there, there's some good talent to be found there. So if you see a lot of big companies, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, all of them have huge R&D centers there. And even budding startups in India like Flipkart has bought a company, and in Israel, a lot of companies, a lot of startups in India, I don't know how many of us know this, but a lot of startups in India rely on Israeli technology to function. Their backend is made stronger by
Absolutely.
Israeli technology. And I'll tell you why it's interesting.
That's
Because Israel, being a small country, they do not have the market in Israel, right? Because it's a small country and technology is a high ticket item.
right.
Usually they sell to Europe and US markets because their investors are from there. They get a lot of investment from there. So naturally their customers come from there, and they do not have the marketing and sales capabilities to enter Asian markets, to enter India. Not all of the companies. So they really focus on B2B technologies. They focus on back-end technologies because that is what the country is all about. Whereas in India, if you look at Indian startups, if you look at the top few startups in India, let's say Flipkart, Paytm, Zomato, Swiggy, to name a few, all of them are B2C startups. All of them are consumer-facing startups,
Right. Hardly
and
these startups, right? You're right.
hardly any back-end
You're
startups,
right.
right? So this is where there's a gap. Israel is such a pioneer in B2B startups, in B2B technology, in backend technology, and India is so strongly focused on B2C. There is, of course, a natural relation between the two countries, right? The technology, there is a supply and there's a demand.
Hmm.
It's very natural. And this gap wasn't being bridged by a lot of people. And that is where we come in as Innovation. That is where we bridge the gap. So we provide Indian companies with access to Israeli technologies, which could really help them grow. And we provide Israeli companies with an access to the Indian market, which they would not have had because they don't have that much sales or marketing expertise. And that is what essentially we bring to the table. And
Wow.
honestly, to be really candid with you, almost everybody is naturally born with a sales and marketing talent. If you talk to anybody, they would be marketing something or the other.
Right.
So it
And
was a natural.
I can see that passion in you as well. You know, the way you express your job. I can totally see that, you know, you're one of those guys who can actually sell anything to anyone, I guess, because you have this amazing talent, you know, for excelling in everything. And more than I'm saying this because I've also met you personally, and you're one of the smartest guys I've actually met, you know,
Okay,
personally.
this is being recorded, Asim. You don't have to.
So just to like let you know that you performed
Thank you.
excellently in your banking role, you moved on to a very dynamic role where you have to understand and unlearn and relearn a lot of things, which you know, which you did very well, and you excelled and you learned something so much. And you know, you're admitted to HEC Paris MBA program where the average is a 30, and you're still like what 26. It is a testament, you know, that you've actually achieved so much in such little time. It shows, you know, the kind of you know, the mind and the brilliance you possess, which you know even the admission officer saw in you. So, and I think you answered a lot of my questions, follow-up questions already. So
Already.
I'll probably move on to next segment, you know, and I want to know your perspective now, you know, because you're one of the most experienced guys, you know, in this space, and you have the best knowledge I think available in, you know, in our circle. So I just want to understand that, you know, why did you end up choosing a foreign MBA over, let's say, an Indian MBA, for example, ISB? Why did you do what is the difference between these programs?
Right. So, interesting question. And again, like I said, every decision that I take, or I think everybody should take, is surrounded and is revolves around people.
Right.
Now, let's think about it for a couple of seconds. In an Indian MBA, which are the top colleges that you would go to? Let's say IIMs are there. There is ISB. Then, if you go down a tier, there is NMIMS and Symbiosis and IIFT, MDI Gurgaon. These are the colleges in India,
Right.
right? Look at the kind of people who go to these colleges. In IIMs, in India, most of the people who go to colleges, MBA colleges in India, are right out of undergrad.
Right.
Correct.
True.
When I go to a college like this, I will be surrounded by people who have just had undergrad experience, at
Right.
least most of them. Right.
Right.
In IIMs and the government institutes, I think 80 to 85% of the people are from engineering backgrounds. Right. If you notice, there's a large trend of IITians going to IIMs. So if I go to a college where I want to learn a lot of things, right, I am going back to school to learn a lot new things that I don't know and diverse things. But if I am again surrounded by a similar kind of group, a similar peer set who do not really have a real world experience, it is not really a good idea for me to go there.
I
Because the reason for me
right.
doing an MBA is to make sure I learn something that I cannot learn otherwise, is to learn something very unique and very varied. So
Right.
that can only happen where I'm surrounded by five very different kind of people, very different to me. But if you look at the subset that goes to Indian MBA colleges right out of graduation with very little to no work experience, mostly engineering backgrounds. So I don't think that is a very good mix that I would want to be in, because that's essentially, if you don't have any experience in real world, you are going to the MBA university just to study, right? It's mostly academics. You've only been exposed to academics so far. And
Right.
what you'll take out of it is mostly academics.
Right.
Another reason I'll tell you is I okay, forgive me for being politically incorrect, but I'm just going to be very honest here. When I did the interview with ISB, right? And they asked me some questions. They asked me technical questions. They asked me questions about academics. They asked me questions to solve some analytical question. They asked me to solve a puzzle, things like that. Now, then I started to think the kind of people who would be able to answer these questions would go to Indian universities, right? So people who are technically sound. So
Mhm.
let's say if I could solve a mathematical formula, I am eligible to enter ISB. And if that is the criteria that people have to cross to get into a college, you can understand that people who are good in academics will be in ISB or will be in any other Indian institute. ISB is just an example here. So in any other Indian institute, but I don't want to go to an MBA just to be surrounded by academics.
Got it.
I want to go there to get a wholesome experience. And that is what I get in an MBA, which I get abroad. People who have 4 to 5 years of work experience from all sorts of work background, all sorts of ages, every country. And that is essentially the experience that I wanted to get, because that is what I feel will make my time, my investment worth it.
Right. An interesting thing you mentioned, you're actually, the basic of like average of 5 people you meet. And since you are going to HEC Paris, where people come with very diverse experience, people have army background, people have come from medical
Exactly.
background and different industries coming together. And they're not like people who've just studied, cracked an exam and made it. Like, so for example, a cat.
Correct.
I totally see, you will be probably one of the youngest people to go with a lot to learn as well, which I think I totally see that as well, since you have an amazing work ex, making it so young. And of course, all the differences you brought out were pretty relevant. So now here, I just want to understand, since your work involves, working with these cool, innovative, these high growth Israeli tech startups, you understand entrepreneurship really well. So I just want your thoughts on, do you feel for someone who's starting out his own venture, do you think MBA is something that is essential or is necessary, or someone without an MBA might just be better suited for entrepreneurship? Just want your take on this.
I don't think there is a someone is better suited for entrepreneurship if they have an MBA or not, but I will absolutely say that it is not necessary. An
Okay.
MBA is absolutely not needed to start an entrepreneurial journey. And honestly, you just need to have the determination and a good idea to start off. And if you really honestly are waiting to get a degree, or to get some qualification before you venture out down that path, then you haven't really put a lot of thought into it, and you're not convinced yourself. If you are convinced yourself that I should just start off with an idea. And if you look at a lot of startups, most of the startup founders, successful startups, they don't have an MBA. A lot of them are
Fair,
dropouts. If you look at the
fair, fair,
global list, right, a lot of
fair.
them are dropouts, which means, and essentially, even after an MBA, the things that you would learn in real world business, in no matter what degree you do, the things that you learn when you're actually on the front field, you cannot replace it. There is no substitute for that. So no matter how many degrees you do, you will not be able to replicate it. So my answer to that, my very simple answer is no, an MBA is not needed. Really, you just need to have a good will, and and that spirit that I'm able to take a risk. I'm able to follow my passion. Passion could be anything. Entrepreneurial journey does not necessarily mean like a business. If I'm a photographer and I can start a photography page and I can run it very well, that's also an entrepreneurial venture. So if and I really don't need an MBA for that, right? So I would definitely not, I would definitely say that an MBA is not a necessity to do it. However, if you are looking to explore new things, where you want to meet a lot of people, like I said, everything is about people, right? Everything that you do is about people, everything around you. So if you want to see how you can improve yourself, if you want to push yourself, if you want to see yourself push through every aspect of life and figure out a lot of things and see what direction you want to choose, then an MBA is the best path to explore, according to me.
Right.
And there are a lot of reasons to do an MBA, but the most important is, are you there are only two reasons actually to do an MBA. Either
Mhm.
you really know why you want to do an MBA, if it's going to help you with your career path, or you really don't know what path you should take because you have so many options and you want to explore and meet all sorts of people. So these are the reasons I would definitely think are meant for an MBA, but not definitely to start an entrepreneurial venture.
Great. No, I totally get it. Also, like, I know one of the reasons why people go for MBAs, for example, either they're fed up with their job, they're not having enough growth, or, one of the other reasons which someone told me was people want to change industries. Like, let's say you are in marketing, now you want to go to, let's say, sales. So MBA is a
Yep.
great, career switcher as well. And since you understand the process of, preparing for, an MBA program, this is where I want to follow up on this question and ask you, how did you start your preparation for MBA, and what would be the advice? Some Can you please share some tips? Someone who's starting out, to explore MBA programs and he wants to make it to one of the top programs, just like you did. What should a guy like this guy should do?
Right. So, firstly, I think the first and foremost reason which everybody will tell you is to know your why. I mean, even Simon Sinek says it, that know your why. You should know why you want to do an MBA. And honestly, I believe if enough people just put in their time and effort to think about it and to ask the relevant people and research online, they will find out their why. they will know very easily why they want to do an MBA, and if not, why not.
Right.
And that is step one, of course. Like you mentioned, people are fed up of their jobs, they want to switch industries, but MBA is not the only way to get rid. MBA is not the only solution to those problems.
Right. Right.
MBA is one of the solutions to those problems, right? So my first step to anybody doing an MBA is to know your why. Know why you want to do it, because it's a significant investment of your time and money and energy and resources. So you want to make sure, I mean, see, nobody can really be sure what will come out of it until you go for it. A lot of people are bogged down by the idea that, if I invest my time here, what will I get? Are you sure you'll get a good ROI? Are you sure this idea will work out? Honestly, you can't really be 100% sure about most things in life, right? Things just, you have to take it with the flow, and you have to make sure that opportunities come your way and you're opportunistic and you go for it. So I also, when I was applying for my MBA, first thing I did was spent a lot of time understanding why I want to do it. Next, once I figured out why I want to do it, what I want to take out of the course, how it will benefit me, and honestly, if you put enough time and thought into it, it's not that difficult. Once I got that, I made a list of schools which suited my needs best. I asked around a lot of people if I should do it, if the school is good, what they recommend, what they suggest, got down my notes, started preparing for the application. GMAT, most people get stuck at GMAT. They feel that I need to have a good GMAT score also, which is important to a certain degree. But GMAT is just the beginning. GMAT is just the first step towards it. I believe that you should be focusing more time on writing your applications and your essays, no matter what background you're from. Like you mentioned earlier, right? People are from army, people are from creative fields, people are from consulting, they are from corporate, they're from all across the world, and everybody's getting into the same program, which clearly goes to say that there is no one path to do an MBA, right?
Yeah.
You can be from any background. If your why is strong enough, if your future goals meet what you will get out of the college, then you're a good fit. Which is why I'm stressing again on the fact that why MBA is the most important question, which is the only question most colleges really care about.
Hmm.
How you fit in. The
Right.
second most thing that the colleges will care about is what value you will add to the class.
Okay.
They want to make sure when they have a class, let's say a class of 10 people, they want to make sure that a class is very diversified, so that 10 people get 9 different kinds of learnings, right? That is also a major difference in Indian and foreign MBAs, because the variety of people in the class will be very different. And the more things and honestly, I would not say that you go through the typical route of corporate jobs and then you will get to an MBA, or that will hurt or help your chances. But whatever route will help you, whatever you want to do, your route should be aligned with that. As long as the colleges can see an alignment, I think you're a good fit for a college.
Very
Even a
important,
college.
very important thing you mentioned was, a very diverse class size you have in the MBA. And this is something I know because of only a handful of intakes who get into HEC Paris is, 290 strong batch. About 93 people come from 93% of the people actually come from different nationalities, which is just like amazing. Which was something when I read about, I was like, wow, this actually is
That's
going
one of
to
the
be
reasons I
really
chose
transformational,
HEC actually.
which was great. And this is where, since you've talked about MBA preparation, what was your process like which helped you, and what might help other people? This is I have a question which I had for like quite a while. Like, when I went to, education sector is now booming, a lot of money is coming into it, and people have realized the importance of it and investing a lot of money into it. Now this is where we've seen rise of education MBA consultants as well.
Mhm.
Like, I went to a school called DPS RK Puram, where, almost every other person was, applying abroad through SATs, having those admission consultants, paying them lakhs of money. Now I just want to understand, has it become so competitive in today's time that you need a second set of hands to work on your application? Or is this something you can do it on your own if you dedicate enough time to it?
I mean, let me ask you that question. What do you think the answer to that is?
Uh, I think it depends on the person. Like, let's say someone has like a lot of money in his hand, and he thinks that, he can get the best out of it. Someone else writes for him. And, he feels, it might just help him because it's such a competitive world. You get bogged down by work experience, work as well, because, you're a working professional. So a lot of people hire them to write their own essays. But this is just my take on it. But I just want to
So
understand your thing.
I I 100% think that this is something one person can do on their own also.
Okay.
They do not need to hire a consultant. However, hiring a consultant does have its advantages, mainly two. The first and foremost thing is they save a lot of time. If I were doing it myself, I would have to do a fair bit of research about colleges, their intake, what kind of profiles they're accepting, kind of people who are already studying there, getting connected to them. If I want to apply for aid or scholarships, what is the process? What kind of essays I should write? Although I can do all this research on my own, consultants have already done it for so many other people, right?
Hmm.
So they will save my time. And second is the experience that they bring, because if they've been doing it for hundreds of students, they know what works and what doesn't.
Right.
So
Right.
while I think that it is entirely possible to do it on your own to save time, I would suggest it's worth the money. I mean, if you're a working professional, you probably don't have that much time. You are always bogged down with your job, and you know how hectic work can get, right? I mean, to find time to do other things outside work, it's sometimes a challenge. And most of the people in the early stages of their career are working weekends, they are working long hours, especially in banking. So they they find that there is a lot of value in hiring someone who will save their time. And honestly, I don't see anything wrong with it, because anything that saves you time is worth the money, right? It is
Right.
saving me time, it is getting me the experience, and essentially every essay that will go out will be my own. The consultant can just give me some pointers, but the essays will be my own, the story will be my own, and I have to defend everything in an interview anyway.
Hmm. Got it.
So interview is also a very important process, a part of the process. So a consultant can help you, but interview you'll be alone, right? So you
Got
need to make
it.
sure that everything is on point.
Got it. Got it. Thanks for providing this perspective, Mudit. This is where, since
First.
you mentioned about work experience and how hectic sometimes banking can get. Now, I want to touch upon one of the classic debates, which a lot of people, especially in India, they have in their minds. When you're applying to, let's say, one of the best B schools, where, every little thing matters, from essays to grades to like work experience. I want to understand, how do business schools view, working for an unknown, like a small firm, which is fairly unknown, compared to a bigger firm like KPMG's or like, Goldman Sachs of the world. So what is your take on that, and how do business schools view these kind of experiences?
So there are a couple of ways. I think there are two ways that schools would view it. It actually really depends on the school. For example, if I had to apply to a school like NCR, and if
Right.
I do a little bit of research, you see that most of the people in NCR are go there after 6 to 7 years of work experience.
True.
Most of them are from corporate backgrounds, largely being consulting and then banking, consulting largely. And
Right.
most of the people who get placed also are into consulting. So NCR actually is a career advancement college. Just an example here, right? So if I were a consultant in a tier two firm and I would want to go to a tier one firm or maybe learn a little bit more about consulting, NCR is the right fit for me. And that is how they will select their students. However, if I have to apply to a school like HEC, which is more on the entrepreneurial side, not completely, but a little more on the entrepreneurial side, they would be more welcoming to people from various backgrounds and
Okay.
various work experiences. So
Okay.
also, which is also one of the reasons why I wanted to choose HEC over NCR, because again, the variety in the class. LBS, another school, is focuses a little more on grades, on marks, because that is the kind of course they have, that is the kind of faculty they get, that is the kind of students they want to have in their batch.
Hmm.
Again, a little bit of varieties everywhere in every batch, but to what degree and what is it that you're looking for. So if I'm coming from a small background, if a small firm or a startup, if my story fits in well, that is this is the second point. If one is from the what the school is all about. Different schools have sort of different kind of flavor to them. Number two is again, to back this example a little more, if I were applying to US schools and I wanted to go into the startup world or the tech world, schools on the West Coast would be better for me because they're closer to Silicon Valley. They
Hmm.
would want students with that kind of profile, with that kind of career path, with that kind of goals. If I were going to more towards banking or finance, schools, let's say New York or the East Coast, that would be better for me because that's closer to Wall Street. So that's how the recruitment happens. That's how talent is hunted, and that is how the schools will decide what kind of background students should come from. So essentially, number one is school. Number two is why MBA again. If the reason for doing my MBA is going to just help me move on my startup path, for example, or my entrepreneurial path, then definitely a strong story is much better than a strong background, if you know what I mean. If my story fits in well, if my reason for doing an MBA is strong enough, if the school also aligns with what I want, what schools are looking for is also a part of your story. If everything is aligned with what I want to do, where I want to go, and the schools are supportive of that, then that essentially is the only reason that only thing that matters. It does not matter the kind of background I'm from. It only matters where I want to go, and if the school can help me. If I can help the school, they also want that the class is has a lot of value. Different people come there, and people, they usually look for people who they think will be a little more successful once they pass out. Again, nobody can really say if you'll be successful or not, but
Right.
to some degree it does matter. If you can convince the school that your course is going to help me and I will do good, then nothing better than that story, right?
Interesting. Right. Right. And I think it's a great perspective of, like going for a bigger role in a small firm versus going for a bigger firm, but a smaller role. And it's very well said, Mudit. Moving on to the question, which is something it's been going around a lot, these days, startup experience is really glorified, having startup experience, you learn a lot, but this is only startups which do well, but there are also startups who
Yeah.
are just not, they're not the high growth startups which offer you the kind of learning. So I'm just trying to make sense of the fact when, if I want to go for, let's say, a startup job where I want to learn, accelerate my learning like you, what kind of startups should I be looking for?
See, this is a question only I think a person can answer for themselves. I mean, I will not be able to tell you you should go for a startup in fintech, or you should go for an ed tech company, or you should go for a pharma tech company. Those answers I cannot give because that is very personal. For me, I wanted to explore a little bit in the technology world, so I figured innovation would be a good bet for me. However, I would like to highlight one point. High growth or low growth, or successful or unsuccessful, the learning curve will always be steep in a startup, especially more if it's an unsuccessful startup.
Okay.
There'll be a lot more struggle, a lot more hustle. See, hustling is everywhere in the startup world. The smaller it is, the more you hustle,
Makes
the
sense.
harder you have to work. But I don't think there's a right startup or a wrong startup, essentially. And think about it, a smaller startup, let's say you are the fourth or the fifth person joining the startup, right? You're part of the founding team, and you join. You have 20% of the responsibility to make sure that the startup does well, right? So that kind of responsibility, that, so if the startup is not doing well or doing well, really a lot of it really depends on you. When you join a smaller startup which is not doing well, in a startup, a lot of people, everybody in a smaller, I'm not talking about startups like Zomato or Flipkart. Talking about startups because a job at Flipkart and Zomato is essentially secure, right? At this point, uh, I would not call them, I mean, these companies are going for an IPO, so I would not call them startups in technical,
Interesting. Yeah, right, right. Like unicorns now, man. Like, so, yeah.
yeah, exactly. Most of these companies that we hear about are unicorns or sunicorns, so
So, you
they
yeah.
are not really the right set of examples to give, because they have so much backing right now and they have so much consumer dependency that it'll be very difficult to think of them as startups that can fail. Coming to a smaller set of startups which can fail, a lot of 90% of the startups fail, essentially. And the learning curve is steep. And I will not say that, it is a good thing or a bad thing. Again, everything will come down to what you want, but I personally think startup experience is really, really, really enriching and really enlightening. Having said that, the path that I took, I started off with a corporate job at banking and then moved to a startup. Honestly, I did not know better. Out of college, I did not know what I really wanted, where I wanted to go. I had some inclination towards finance. Nomura was a good opportunity that came my way, so I went there. Then I started asking questions. Then I started figuring out, a little bit of things. But having a corporate experience on your CV also adds a lot of value. So essentially my suggestion would be to do a little bit of corporate, spend a little bit of time in corporates, spend a little bit of time in larger enterprises, and then come to the startups, because that is where I'll be able to add a lot more value to the startup. If I have a little bit of experience working, like I said in the beginning of this session, that when I worked at Nomura, what did I learn? What were my takeaways? How do large companies function? How to work with teams? How to work with teams across the globe? Because I learned all these things, I could implement it in innovation, right?
Right.
Working with people
Right.
in Israel who are, different country, different culture. Working with people, I'm essentially working with countries outside Israel also, a lot of European companies. And because I had so much experience at Nomura, I could implement it over here. I could help innovation. I could add more value here because I had that backing.
And I
Another point where I think,
right.
just one last point,
Sure, sure, sure.
why corporate could be helpful is, a lot of recruiters in large companies, they look at your CV, they see where you're coming from, and that is how they judge you. A lot of them do, like it or not, it is the reality. So
Right.
if I start off with a startup and then I want to apply to, let's say, MBB, BCG, Bain, or McKinsey, they might not look very, very favorable to me if the startup isn't doing well, right? And I mean, it's very difficult for me from a fledgling startup to go into an MBB. However, if I come from a corporate background, it is easier for me to go to a startup, right? So if I start corporate, I can go startup. But if I start from a startup, it is difficult, a little more difficult for me to go into a corporate.
I
So I
see.
would say
I see.
spend some time in corporate, get that experience, get that on your CV. CV is also important if you're looking to go into the job market after that. Get that done, then go to the startup. Essentially, you're securing yourself a little bit and also adding more value to the startup.
I understand. Right. And there was something I just wanted to mention. When the kind of learnings you brought, you emphasized a lot throughout the interview on people skills. It's all
Right.
about the people, and I think this is one of the biggest takeaways, at least for me. Wherever you want to succeed, it's going to be people. How you have to influence them, how you work with them, build relationship with them, work in a
Correct.
team, which is very important. And I think you're one of the best people to understand it and implement it in your like on the job. And so I think I've understood a lot about the choices you made and learnings you've had in the past. Now, Mudit, I want to take you further and I want to understand where does Mudit Dugar want to be in the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself?
Uh, so I have been personally asking that question to myself a lot. And honestly, given how 2020 went, I don't think there can be an answer to that question. If you had asked someone, where do you think your life is going to be? In 2015, had you asked someone where your life is going to be in 2020, they
Right.
would have so many answers, right? They would say, I want to do this, I want to do that. Nobody's plans worked out in 2020, right? Nothing really happened. So then that is when I realized, like, thinking about what will happen later, what's going to happen. I know what I want to do next. I know what I feel like doing next. What is the next good thing for me? What is the next right thing for me? What is my next step? But what is the step after that? What is the step after 3 moves after that? Is something that I have not spent a lot of time thinking, because essentially, no matter what I think about, is not going to pan out. When I start, if you had asked me this question earlier, I would have said I want to do an MBA. So essentially, from an MBA, build a network, spend some time working there, and then start my own venture based on the contacts and on the learnings I have. Start my own venture either from abroad or from India,
Right.
depending on where I get the opportunity.
Right.
And right now, if you ask me, that is something that I still want to do, but I'm not really thinking too much about it or betting on it, because you never know, right? Nobody saw 2020.
That's
Nobody saw what was
important. True.
coming. So you can never see what's happening in the future. And essentially, uh, there's no point investing time in thinking about what might happen, what you want to do. Just think about the next best move, the next thing, one step, and then that will automatically lead to somewhere. You've seen that Steve Jobs interview, right? Nothing makes sense going forward. Everything makes sense when you look back.
You connect the dots going, yeah,
Exactly.
going back.
So, I mean, these are principles that 2020 has really enforced on me, embossed on me, that these are things you should actually think about.
Wow, this was really insightful. It's really great insight you just brought out right now about taking life step by step and then figuring it out. Just having the right intentions, the right plans, and hoping for the best. So Mudit, thanks again, for being on our channel and sharing these amazing insights with the community. Thank you so much, Mudit. I wish you all the luck going ahead.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.